written in the 1902 Florence Shin's book, Your Word is Your Wand. None of this spiritual transformational stuff is new. It's all there. It's just the way it's presented and the way it's delivered, and it's how somebody is receiving it at that moment.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How is everybody doing? This is the Impactful Coaching Podcast. My name is Joseph. I'm a media expert. I've been in the space for about 10 years. And what I do is I help anybody who's trying to make a difference in the world understand and utilize media to the best of their ability or my ability, whichever one has a higher ceiling. And I'm here today with Dr. Lisa Moore. Lisa, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Joseph, for inviting me to be on your podcast today. It's quite an honor.
It's a blast to have you, and it is an honor for me as well. And so, as my audience knows, and as I make it clear to my guests, is I think it's important to take some time to learn a little bit about my guest before going into the conversation. And so it says here that Lisa Moore, spiritual coach, author, and speaker. Now, the subject of spirituality is, for me, it's an irresistible subject. And I think it's great for the nature of podcasting because there's no right or wrong. It's a matter of how each of our points of view have been informed by our deeper beliefs. And I myself do hold a higher set of beliefs. It's not, strictly speaking, a conventional set of beliefs, but it is something that I want to make sure that people know we're going to be talking about today. So with that, we do have some staples of the podcasting world that we've got to clear before we can really sink into this conversation. So Lisa, would you care to let the audience know what you do and what contributions you make to the coaching world?
That sounds great. So I'm a spiritual coach, transformational coach, healer. I'm an author. I have many different modalities and tools that I offer my clients. And doing retreats, I live in Sedona, Arizona. So it is a Mecca spiritual haven, although it's starting to shift. People are taking the spirituality home, to their own countries, and are really looking for things, community, and finding that essence. And we'll go into that much deeper today of really finding that passion and the joy and how to handle stress and what do I need to do. We're in a pivotal point, and a lot of people are really struggling these days. I see it with clients, I see it with friends. I've seen my own personal struggles, and I say, thank goodness I have the tools to be able to get to the other side. And my partner, who's also very spiritual and does many different tools. So it's we're all finding we're having to come together to support each other on this changing time on the planet as everybody is starting to awaken and are finding their joy, which is the key.
This is a theme that I have realized was coming up over the course of perhaps the last 8 or 9 recordings, is that we have a pretty significant change on the way. And I'm speaking, of course, of artificial intelligence and the way it is changing productivity, the way it's changing art. I mean, I can't think of anything that it's not going to change. And what occurred to me, thanks to a previous conversation, was the fact that we have to continue to innovate as people and as human beings. Otherwise, we're just going to get caught up in the machine, and we're eventually just going to we could risk becoming machines ourselves, which I don't think is what we're here to do. I think this is a human test. This is a human experience. And so our role is to use these tools to enhance the human experience so that we can continue to inform technology to innovate in ways that service us and not the other way around. So and it is a genuine fear. I mean, not everybody thinks we're going to end up like the Matrix or end up like the Terminator, but the fears that I think are more palpable are more subtle, the more nuanced. It's more the slow erosion of our day-to-day lived experience. And being someone who's like basically born and raised on the internet, like as far as my nationality goes, like Italian, but more internetian, is I've seen it. and I've grown up in a generation that sees it. I see a lot of disconnect.
Yeah.
Ironically, because the more people are connecting to the internet, the more people are connecting to avatars of themselves and more perceived projections of themselves, and then spending less time understanding who we actually are. And I think a balanced approach to that can actually be quite insightful. Is a person who knows themselves really well can project a more accurate avatar, whether it's a nickname or a pseudonym or even just like a slight variation of who we are. That's sort of like the opening salvo. What I wanted to do was first understand your journey towards becoming a coach, and especially if there was perhaps a different path you thought you were taking. Some people, for instance, maybe they were in carpentry or textiles or whatever, and then it became a coach as more of a pivot. So I'd like to hear your story.
Okay, great. I grew up in Canada. We had shared a little bit, and I was pretty intense athlete, natural athlete. Not, I was never coached, but I had the ability to could have skied on the Canadian ski team, golf, tennis, and it was all came to me very naturally without any form of coaching. So I moved to the US. My kids were pretty little, and when I moved down there, I got heavily involved in tennis, and my tennis partner, female, we had a very, very tight bond, very, very connected on so many different levels. Our husbands were best friends, our kids were best friends. And, we were both married. So we never crossed the boundary of, oh my God, am I gay? I'm in love with you. And it was an emotional marriage, basically. Well, her husband got very jealous. And she basically one day said, I can't be around you any longer. And it was like a dagger had gone through my heart. And talk about stress. It was just brutal. And I found a parapsychologist and basically went back to school. This was in late 1999, roughly, and just started studying like crazy and got really deep on my spiritual path I learned, became an angel therapist practitioner. I got into many different healing modalities, hypnosis, and transformational coaching, and as I say, it was a very big, deep connection to the spirit realm for me. And that's why my branding is a master connector. It comes to me very fluidly and very naturally. Well, what I realized in that transformational time was my real spiritual gift was being a natural athlete. I never thought, it just flowed. So that was my real aha moment of understanding who I was. But I was a stay-at-home mom raising my kids. I started a healing practice and started coaching and speaking and traveling to Canada and doing events, and went over to Europe and taught over there. Again, I was 33 when I had my awakening and getting into numbers and numerologies, the Christ conscious, Yeshua, Jesus, whatever that energy you want to connect with, and learning so much about myself through astrology and numerology and Enneagram. I couldn't deny the fact of I'm here as a spiritual being and I need to share my story, which I've been through a lot. It was just that aha moment. And I go to myself, thank goodness I realized at age 33 to the depth of my soul of who I am. And this is who I've come here to be this lifetime. So I'm able to offer and point people to right places when they're questioning, who am I? What is my purpose? What is my joy? And I can't stress enough to people that, you may wake up one day and realize, oh, I really want to be an author. And you start writing a book. And after a month, you're going, what the heck am I doing? I can't stand this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's to really, really, especially these days, staying in your flow, staying in your lane, staying in the energy of what brings you joy. And what was also interesting, I was listening to one of your podcasts. I can't remember who you had interviewed, and it was, so many people are caught up in the day-to-day grind of a job. And yeah, a job can be stable. It can create stable income for people. And yet, on the other hand, it can be very stressful for people. So it's really important to look at what you're doing and really dial into that heart space of who am I? what am I here to do? And and looking at old programming, I as a little girl, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a bigwig with Bell Canada. So, we were the country club and the Royal Ottawa Golf Club and that's how I was raised. And I'll never forget my mom saying to me as a little girl, I'll never work because I don't need to work and I wouldn't take a job away from somebody that really needs that money. So
Mhm.
my mom basically was a professional volunteer. That's how she would spend hours and hours and raise millions of dollars for nonprofits. And that's where she got her joy. So, but I know for me, that seed was played in my head. I went to college, I went to Bishop's University, I have a business degree, but I made the choice to stay at home and raise my kids, which I love. But at certain times I go, wow, I could have had a great pension if I had taken a job and this, that, and the other thing. But it wasn't the path. And I loved being a mom, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a great lifestyle doing it. And, I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity because I know there's a lot of moms out there that would love to be at home with their kids, but don't have the luxury from financial or from whatever. So it's really, really important to tap into that essence of what's floating in your heart and soul to who you are and finding that passion.
You've given me a lot to unpack, and I'm very thankful for that. I'll state a couple of things, but I want to do these briefly just because when I know I'm saying something I've said on the program before, I want to let my audience know. Like, I don't want you to feel like 10 minutes of the episode is dedicated to me just repeating myself, but here goes. The next question I'm going to ask you is about how did you really know and confirm that what you were experiencing was joy? Because I think that there could be some confusion between what is joy and then what is happiness or what is pleasure. All positive things, all have their place, but the difference between joy is it's so much, I think, more deeply rooted in that spiritual side of it.
And that's a great question. I think when you really tap into the joy, call it God energy, call it universal energy, source energy, when you know to that core essence of your beingness, that you're in the flow. I'm really all about there's two emotions, love and fear,
Mm-hmm.
positive and negative. And sometimes we need to stop and say, is this coming from a negative energy or an old belief or an old pattern or religious reasons or whatever it is? Or is this coming from a positive energy? How's this making me feel? Now, when you go down that path of feeling, yeah, there's many scenarios that can play havoc with us. Like my partner and I were living in a house for 6 years and we both got extremely sick. Well, make a long story short, the house was riddled in mold, black mold, to the point where we were losing our minds. So there's many different components while we go into that joy. And we had to look at the scenario and wondering why, again, why, as my guides came in and said, switch that analogy, the WHY, to yes. Yes, this is an experience that you're having to go through, and it may not feel great, but something on the other side will shine a bright light. And I can't tell you how many people, how many hearts and souls we have been able to share with people our story of going through the mold scenario,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it's been life changing for people to hear our story. So I think that was a big part of, and we even went into the spiritual piece of mold. Mold is sticky, keeps you stuck. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
were sacrificing in this home. What was keeping us in this home was the land. We were on an acre of land. We had a labyrinth on the property. We loved the land. The house wasn't the greatest for two people working, coaching out of a home. But when COVID happened, we were stuck home. And that's when we got really sick. So going back to the joy, was it joyful going through the mold experience? Heck no. But let me tell you, giving myself that, sharing our story going through it has brought me a great amount of joy, big time. So this again is trusting in the energy of where that joy is. Can you feel the difference with the vibe, with the frequency that comes from joy? And again, it's getting out of our heads the should, could, woulds, the tries, the old beliefs that get embedded into us, and really tapping into that joy. And for people to stop long enough to really assess, wow, is this really bringing me joy? Am I really having fun doing this? How does it make me feel sitting and watching the news, which is so heavy and dense, and here in the US, it's just beginning with the political stuff. And I don't even turn it on. I mean, I'm even selective on how much I'm on social media because it's this person saying this and this person. So for people to give themselves permission to stop and really assess, wow, is this a positive frequency or is this a negative frequency? And I think some of us, I know for myself, I came in this lifetime with being a very positive person. It's just embedded in me. So I do think they're part of the lineage that we bring in as part of our soul agreements. And it's just me, uh, it, it's to the core cell of who I am, being that positive frequency. I've never been a doom and gloom type of scenario. And yes, I had a rough year last year with the son going through mental health issues and almost having his foot amputated, and the pain as a parent that I cried more last year than I had in a very long time. And yet I understood I was in my Saturn return in
Mhm.
astrology. So the more we can learn about ourselves and the more we can go deeper into that essence, the easier we can flow through life with joy.
Well, the story that I wanted to exchange with you about this, and the one that I've more in the audience that I've said before, was the struggle that I had for a very long time about trying to become a published author, trying to become a professional writer. And what I found I kept encountering was opportunities to use other skills in my skill set,
Hmm.
hoping that those would open the door to writing opportunities, because all the entry level opportunities hyper competitive at any given point. There's hundreds of other people who are vying for these same roles, and I have bills to pay. But what happened to me was a realization that oscillated between joy and fear.
Yep.
So on the one hand, the fear came first. It was after I had seen an online YouTube creator explain why the last season of Game of Thrones didn't go so well was because the books weren't done. And because the books weren't done, the show didn't know exactly how to con- storytell with the same confidence that they did prior to, because they had material to reference. And that was really one of the key reasons that the show didn't stick the landing that everybody thought it was. And he criticized the writer for it, saying he needed to finish the book, and it's not going to get any easier as his mental faculties decline. Sorry to say. And that made me realize, gee, if I don't do this, it's not going to get easier. So now no one wants to live a life driven by fear, but it helped me as a reference point, because at the same time, I was not quite the same time, but I was also given some material from George Orwell about why he writes. And one of the things he said is just the joy of constructing sentences is in of itself a great appeal. And thinking that actually writing was going to be laborious and intense and annoying and frustrating, what actually ended up happening was the complete opposite. I actually experienced a lot of the joy that I feel that maybe you had experienced in your own way. So much so that now I'm just looking for more opportunities to get out of the house, go to a cafe, I don't want to buy the expensive coffee every time, because that's going to eat up my margins pretty quick. But at least like $2 cup of coffee. Which, side note, I think it's actually much more beneficial to pay a little bit of money at a cafe, because there's more of a compulsion to produce something, as opposed to just being at home like, well, I'm already comfortable, so who cares about work? So
Yeah.
the point that I'm getting at in all of this is I found this truth was in the center between joy and fear. Is I didn't want to deny the shadow. I didn't want to deny the darkness. I wanted to acknowledge it and acknowledge the power that it had, but also recognize that if I can find its equal in the light, that gives me the path forward that I wanted, that I now pursue. So that's just something that I wanted to exchange with you. But the next thing that I also wanted to just say was offer my sympathies to your son and his struggle with mental illness. It's an ever changing issue, and it ties into what we also want to talk about in regards to stress. So
Hmm.
what I would like to do is chamber all of that. We'll move into that subject next. Floor is open for a second in case you had anything you wanted to say in response to what I just said, and then I will formally ask you the next question.
Well, thank you about my son. And I think there's a lot of parents and siblings that are dealing with loved ones that are going through dark night of the souls. And he had gone through a scenario when he was 20. He's now 36. And he got addicted to drugs and finally agreed to going to rehab. And 3 months later, and came out and was truly a miracle and has written 2 books, has spoken all over the world, did a full Ironman up at Mont Tremblant, and just an amazing, amazing young man. Was living in Sedona or in Scottsdale and was in a relationship. The relationship ended. This was pre-COVID time. And he decided to go pack up and travel the world for 2 years, which is now up to 5 years. But in the meantime, he got exposed to plant medicine. And it was a slippery slope for him. So he sort of has taken a spiral to that dark night of the soul again and figuring out his stuff. And yet, as a parent, 15 years ago, I would say, have a conversation with my entourage of beings, and I would say, why, again, my human ego side of myself, why did he choose me as a parent? And my guides would say there were not many mothers that could have handled
Mm-hmm.
the high, low, and the ups and downs. And even here I am 15 years later, and I had a rough year last year. And again, I go to myself, this is his path. There's nothing I can do. The only thing I can do is love and support him on his journey. And that's it. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more, and it's not a separation, it's more of a understanding, not to be controlling, not to be judgmental, not to be anything else but that loving being towards our loved ones. And I know a little bit about my story is that when I was married to a man for 23 years and ended up, he ended the marriage. We had gone through a lot financially and having a sick child, which they say the rate of marriages surviving with mental illness or a disease that a child can have, the chances are of a marriage sustaining are really quite slim.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, when I moved to Sedona, it gave me an opportunity to go deeper into that true essence of who am I. And I had never been with a woman. Well, I ended up coming out. And I've been with my partner now 12 years. We have a phenomenal, phenomenal relationship. My kids adore her. And it was that understanding of I have to be true to myself. And the trueness to myself is being with a woman. And people will say to me, well, are you bisexual? And I'm like, I am what I am. I love a woman and that's it. But in all this, my father had passed away and my mom disowned me. So she's still alive. She's 89. She lives in Canada. I saw her at one of my kids' weddings. We spoke for maybe 5 minutes. It was just heartbreaking for me. And I get it. I'm a coach. I can offer assistance and guidance. Well, and I'm grown. I mean, it's not like I'm a 20-year-old that my parents or 15-year-old that these kids, these LGBTQ kids are dealing with, and that parents are throwing them out on the street because of religious beliefs or because of whatever. So it's really challenging. It's really hard. And yeah, it's painful. I don't get a phone call on my birthday or a call. I do reach out to my mom on Mother's Day to I pick up the phone and call her, and it's always a 2-minute conversation, and that's it. And for all I know, she's just cut me off completely. I don't know if she's cut me out of anything. It's just it is what it is. And all I have to say is God bless. Again, I chose her as my mother this lifetime, as my son has chosen me this lifetime. We tend to be the greatest teacher for our parents and to really hone in on that and work through our own issues. And I had to go deeper in my path last year and really just know that this is my son's path. He is on his path. I am not going to interfere with it. I'm not going to try to control it. I am just going to love and support him. I'm not going to enable him. Yes, I've given him $1,000 to pay for a plane ticket here or there. And you know what? He's 36 years old. Go figure it out. And yeah, does he have some mental challenges? Absolutely. Have I seen it? Yes, I have. Have I seen him make it and be an amazing young man for 10 years when he was clean and sober? Yeah, just amazing. So it's an interesting time. And I think with people dealing with the isolation that they've experienced these last 3 or 4 years with the COVID and not being able to see family members or being forced to get the vaccines or not get the vaccines and just creating more chaos for people, which is not what we need. We need to come back and love and support each other for who we are. Amen.
Hmm.
We all chose to be here at this path, as I say to people, whether our time is to go today, in a week, in a month, or in another lifetime. That's our path that we've come here to experience what we are learning. And we learn from our experience.
The one theory that I started developing, and initially, well, I mean, I say it with humor because I always think back to a cartoon from the 90s called Beast Wars, which, it was a Transformers cartoon. It was made to sell toys, but the writers were intelligent people who imparted a lot of mature themes into it. And one of them was about death and rebirth and love. And two characters were their lives were taken from them, but their last vow was to give their souls to each other. And then that one soul fused and became a new character. And it sort of stuck with me is the idea that one of the greatest goals that we can achieve in the course of love is for two souls to fuse and become one person. And
Mm-hmm.
children are somewhat of an indicator of that. Of course, children do become their own thing, but at least you see some of the signs for what that potential outcome can be, because ultimately a child is the fusion of two people. And what I'm curious about is if you had seen any of that narrative through line and how maybe you were a continuation of your mother, but having gained a deeper understanding, and perhaps in what way was your son or any of your children a continuation of what you felt your role in the world was?
Well, it's very interesting because my mom, I was not raised religious,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't even really talk about the word God. My mom was very spiritual. She was part of a medium group. My father's mother she was also part of a spiritual community out of Montreal, and they would travel down to the US. She passed when I was about 5, but I have some of my grandmother's books written in the 1902, Florence Shin's book, Your Word is Your Wand. None of this spiritual transformational stuff is new. It's all there. It's just the way it's presented and the way it's delivered, and it's how somebody is receiving it at that moment. So, like as a coach, we all are teaching and saying very similar things, but sometimes we need to hear things 20 times, and then on the 21st time, that aha goes on for us. And I always laugh when healers go, "Oh, I healed this person." And I'm like, "Really? You healed this person?" No, you showed up. And for whatever reason, that person was ready to experience their own personal healing. I'm very much about that, that it has nothing to do with me. I'm a conduit receiving information. And when somebody's ready to hear it, then they will get it. They will get that aha moment, just like I've had my aha moments. I've had many teachers, many spiritual coaches throughout the course of the last 30 years. I'm turning 60 this year.
Mhm.
And, I'm incredibly grateful that we always know the right teacher is going to show up when that teacher and the student is ready to hear. It just is. But back to my mom. So she was very involved and she was doing reflexology and went to a homeopathic doctor. So I was raised in quite a holistic realm. And then when I had my kids, I chose not to vaccinate them after 15 months. I strictly used homeopathy. I massage our insurance with the Royal Bank of Canada paid for naturopaths and functional medicine. So, that was really, I was ahead of my curve back then as a
Mhm.
young mom. I didn't give my kids apple juice, very little. I would use tea tree oil to disinfect my vegetables. I had a garden in my yard. So I would definitely, I wasn't per se a hippie, but I think that whole spiritual component was already embedded in me, understanding the effects of diet. And when my son got very sick, we found out that he was deathly allergic to eggs, dairy, and wheat, and which was causing some of the psychotic scenarios that he was having. So, I think, yeah, there's pieces where it comes in from the lineage. It comes in from our upbringings. As a little girl, my dad had a huge garden in our backyard. So I'd go out and pick beets and pick carrots and green beans. I made my own baby food and for my kids. So I do think there is a lineage effect with this. But back to my mom, which is really, it's still rather shocking to me that she's so judgmental, that she
Mhm.
wants nothing to do with me. But again, there's nothing I can do. That's her path. She chose it. If I did something, she can't get to that place of forgiveness. And, it is what it is.
Again, I've appreciated everything you've said so far, and I'm sorry that there is that disconnect between you and your mother. I'm fortunate to say that I'm so very close with my parents. My partner has had her issues, but at least we're still together and still able to interact with her mother. If anything, we probably see her too much, but that's the sort of the price we pay for not paying rent. So um, the question that I had wanted to get to, so I'm gonna tell you how I was able to gain sort of an inner confidence in the fact that there even is a higher power, because there is obviously I think a fair amount of skepticism in this. It's not something that is provable the same way we've been able to prove the periodic table of elements. All of that stipulated. And growing up in a heavily media and content driven world, which is something that's only going to get more pronounced, as I said earlier on in the episode, was I saw very clear examples of what the world is not like. Okay, people don't have magic powers. People don't shoot fireballs. People are not
Right.
machines that can turn into cars. This is the real world. And
Bewitched, you know?
yeah, I Dream of Genie. I caught glimpses of that. And even like Star Trek. When I was growing up, it was Star Trek: The Next Generation, which of course plays it straight. But even Star Trek delves into so much mysticism. As the further they get out into space, the less they get, the less they understand, and that's sort of the point. So for me, I wanted to ask myself, how could I actually like really believe this in a way that no amount of pushback could impact? And I was always a heavy dreamer, even very early on. My dreams were vivid. They were insightful. They were impactful. Some of them were terrifying. Some of them still are terrifying. And then I learned that there was such a thing as a lucid dreaming. And what I thought was really beautiful about the idea of lucid dreaming is, in order to do it correctly, you have to actually live a good life, which means be healthy, moderate substance usage. Smoking is bad, alcohol is bad, not exercising, being stressed out. All of these things will disconnect you from your ability to use your pineal gland to generate the fluids you need to actually have a proper dream. So much, and then I remember having one dream. This one wasn't lucid, but because I was in that state, I was offering myself to the dream world much more easily. I remember a dream where I was sitting at a desk, and on the other side was a man who I believed beyond a shadow of a doubt was God. And he says, "So how are you doing, Joseph?" I'm like, "I'm good." He's like, "Okay," and that was it. He's a busy guy, right? So I didn't want to take up too much of his time. But then, like, I still think about that dream, and that dream must have been like 7 or 8 years ago. And I just think to myself, I'd love to see somebody prove me wrong about that. I'd love to see somebody try to like take that away from me. Good luck. I ended up deciding to stop lucid dreaming for two reasons. One is that one of the ways to make it effective is to treat reality more like a dream, having this feeling throughout the day-to-day experience of, am I dreaming right now? Am I in a real place right now? So that the contrast between waking state and dream state is more similar to one another. I didn't
Right.
like that because my family does have a schizophrenic side, and I felt like I was enabling perhaps something recessive in it. So I didn't want to risk it. And then the second one was the idea that some of these dreams can actually last a long time. I remember having one that lasted a good solid 10 minutes, thinking like, I can't get out of this, can I? And that sense and that fear of losing control over it was too much for me. So nowadays, if I find myself in one, great, I'm in for a good time. But otherwise, I don't pursue this anymore. But it gave me this sense of frankly unshakable belief that there is a higher power and we are given tools to access it. We just have
Absolutely.
to be open-minded about how to use these tools and to use them correctly and not abuse them. But what I picked up from listening to you, the impression that I got was it pretty much was like that for you from the get-go. Do you recall any stories or any encounters, even like a miracle or anything that really gave you some like deeper clarity?
Well, again, understanding with basically going back to school and learning how to trans channel
Mm-hmm.
and being able to bring in that energy of knowing I'm a conduit and being an angel guide or being an angel therapist. I got trained with Doreen Virtue years ago. So I had the tools and I had the skill set. And I think the key, and which is a big part of my teaching, is not to allow ourselves to go into the fear, which is the third chakra. That's that why, like I talked about earlier, the WHY. And it's to let it stand for the letter Y, that yes, this is the experience. So, what question I would ask you is that man, that being that showed up in front of you, give me the first name that comes to you right now of who you think it was.
God. I mean, I thought it was God.
Okay. So you associated that being with God, which is the reflection of yourself. So that is when we dream, it really is that mirror aspect of ourselves. And you could never have told me that I would be channeling and be a conduit of bringing in energies. And I work very closely with Archangel Michael. This may be a little too far out with some of your listeners. And again,
I'm all for it. I love to hear it, but I do
and
respect
again,
people's skepticism.
yeah, and again, there are no mistakes. It's just we connect with those that we're supposed to connect with. It's all in a frequency. It's in the divine path that we came here and chose. There's no mistakes that we're having this call today, this conversation, which is magical. So once we can, I wrote a book, an LGBT book called Open to Receive, and it's getting ready to be published. It was part my story, part tools and scenarios about my clients over the years. And the biggest thing I see with people is they don't know how to receive. And it's a matter of keeping it easy. The first question you need to ask yourself is start asking. And instead of saying, I'm open to receive, add that added frequency and you want to open to receive a positive message. So, like back to the dream state, you had an element of fear come in with the astral travel. So, or fear of the unknown, or where am I going to go, or how am I going to get back to Mother Earth, or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. So, asking yourself to remember the positive dreams. to connect you to the positive energy. And it doesn't need to be difficult. People think, oh, harder is better. It's old programming. It does not need to be difficult. And this is a pretty funny story. We found out we were renting a house after going through black mold and such, and
Mm-hmm.
we were gypsies for had to move 8 times in 20 months, and finally landed in a home that we rented from a best friend of ours, and we were in it for 2 years. She decided she wanted to sell, so we knew we had to move. And the fear, again, we're all human. We're here having a human experience. I was struggling personally with the uncertainty. We talked about moving to Phoenix. We talked about moving to Prescott. We talked about moving. Leslie wanted to move back to the East Coast. So there was all this uncertainty. And it was starting to really, I was starting to struggle with it. Like, where should we, could we, blah, blah, blah. Again, old tapes running. And Leslie had just gotten back from a class, and on it was a modality, a healing modality. She was recertifying herself. So she got back and on a Sunday night, and I had been at a party, and I said to a real estate agent friend, I said, "Oh, we have to move again. If you hear of anything, please let me know." And she said, "Oh, you got to move again." And living in Sedona, it's really challenging because everything's gone to Airbnb and such.
Mm-hmm.
So Leslie, I said to her, "Can you please do a session with me?" And within 15 minutes, and the big dilemma for me was uncertainty. So after the session, I was like fit to be tied. I'm like, I'm turning my phone off. I'm going to put a headphone on. I'm going to put a meditation on. I'll see you in 30 minutes. So I come back to, and I check out of my body. I go into my Zen meditation, and I come back and I look at my phone. Well, this agent had called me and left a voicemail or text me, said, "What is your last name?" She said, "This man is going to call you who is looking for somebody to possibly rent his house." Well, make a long story short, within 40 minutes, we were over at this home. The man is like, "It's yours." And it happened so easily,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew Sedona wasn't done with us. Now, there was a side of us going, that was too easy. How could that have happened?
Yeah,
You
what's
know,
the catch?
it's our ego side of ourselves going, no, this couldn't be. This is way too easy, blah, blah, blah. But it was like we stopped and we said to each other, okay, this is the universe talking to us, the home, the Sedona, whatever you want to make of it, God talking to us. We were willing to be open to receive what the universe had in store for us. And we're so grateful that this man basically stepped in, and we weren't done with Sedona. Sedona wasn't done with us. So this is all part of people getting out of their head and really tapping into their heart and trusting in what God, the universe, their higher selves, their spirit guides have in store for them. But sometimes we have to really slow down, move stressors aside, and tap into that flow to really get clear of the joy of what is and where we are each at this perfect divine time here on the planet, and keeping it easy. I think we've all learned it has to be hard in order for it to be better.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, it's just old programming. It doesn't need to be difficult.
Yeah, I brought this term up for the first time in the previous recording, which, as of this recording, is not published yet. So the term, when something is demonized, that came up in the episode that we had only just released about people's relationship with alcohol, and that the more we demonize it, the more we're giving it power, and then the more it might end up taking even deeper control. When in reality, it's neutral. Either you use it correctly, use it moderately, or you don't. And so the
Right.
term demonization comes up a lot. But then I realized that there is the opposite to that, which is what I call angelization, which is thinking something is so good that it is beyond our reach and it is not something that we are deserving of. And so we do have to watch out for angelizing things as much as we have to watch out for demonizing things.
Yeah. And I think if you can put the energy of having that gratitude and being grateful for the experience, then it helps making it more grounded and more connected and more in that flow, which I think will help people as they transform.
Hmm.
And even in relationships, it's understanding, do relationships have to be difficult? No, sometimes there's karma, sometimes there's a lot of past lives, but uh, relationships are supposed to flow with grace and ease. So, really tapping into, I know I work with clients that are miserable in their marriage and they're staying in the marriage because of their perceived attitude or belief around, well, it would be too difficult on the children. Well, let me tell you, those kids know exactly what's going on and don't need to be, don't think you're helping the kids by staying in a miserable marriage or in a miserable relationship. That is not
Yeah.
healthy. That is not healthy at all. And there have been studies that have been done, blind studies that have been done around this with kids and daddy getting in trouble at work and not saying anything and the kids acting out. So don't try to hide from relationships and scenarios where there's an immense amount of stress or an immense amount of issues there because it's not healthy. It creates more havoc.
Hmm. So we are closing in on the last 10 minutes, and I don't think we'll be able to do a dialed in subject for both stress as well as what I wanted to ask you about the LGBTQ space. But
Uh-huh.
stress is an ongoing thing, and I think a lot of what we discussed today is at the very least something to consider when engaging it. So I'm gonna put a check mark on that box. But I did
Okay.
want to ask you about your coaching work with people in the space. It's not a space that I'm a participant of. So here's a question, and it might be a challenging one, but I wanted to see how we handle this. Is that someone who is going through a rejection of the household, but
Hmm.
B is also having difficulty coming to terms with their own humanity, whether that is preferences, like what you've discussed earlier, but also their own composition. No, I for one, I do respect people who desiring to transition. I'm not against that, but like I mentioned to you before recording, is that I would prefer to take a more cautious approach to it and say
Right.
maybe everyone who did it maybe it needed to look at some other options first. I'll leave it at that. So that is a lot of challenge to work with someone, is how to reconnect someone to their humanity, how to reconnect them to a spiritual path, having been in a household that was so-called spiritually driven, and then the result is just excommunication. So it's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, so I've written, like I mentioned to you, I've written a book, and so we are actually locking into some dates to do a spiritual retreat for the LGBT community. I do work with straight ally and family members that are struggling with, you know, having children that are gay or siblings that are gay and are struggling. I think the main thing I offer is the opportunity for people to come and be vulnerable. And yet, as a psychic, as a medium, as a healer, as a coach, I tap in to the divine light, to the God essence. So it's a little bit different from a coaching standpoint because it's information that is delivered. I do share with clients that I say, if this information resonates today, a week, in a month, in a year, in another lifetime, it is what it is. It has nothing to do with me. It's about allowing tools for each of us knows who we truly are to the true essence. It's just learning how to access it and to be with that. And then on the other spectrum, as a healer, I can energetically, my guides go in and clear out whatever needs to be cleared out. And again, I have many different processes that I use. And sometimes it may take three different processes before a person gets that light that truly comes on for them. So they can really connect into, wow, this is who I am. This really feels right to me at this perfect divine time. let me find my joy again, whether it's sitting and reading a book to learn about angels or learn about crystals or learn how to astro travel. So again, these things shift and they change. The key is to stay present, to stay in the moment of what is. Because as you know, as a coach and speaking with people, we can all get so caught up in the past, in the old stories, in the old uh, genre of life.
Hmm.
And the key comes back to find, get present within what is right now. And it's not about pointing your fingers. I'm this way because my mother did this, or the church did this, or my teacher did this. This really comes back to owning your stuff because it is easy for us to point fingers. As I like to say, when we point fingers, we really have
Hmm.
three fingers pointing back at us. So there is no separation. And, I do online coaching, I do Zoom calls, I do phone calls. I'm very accessible. I, again, will allow people. My true belief is allowing people to take responsibility when they are ready to step in, that they step in. And if I, let's say, have a client that's really, really struggling, then I will set something up. But I'm really about empowering and inspiring people because that's where the core essence comes from. It doesn't come from out there, it comes from within here. It's time. People are seeking. I've had wonderful conversations with people that are really wanting to go deeper into and it's not even woo-woo stuff. It's more deeper into hearing and sharing and seeing that light within them and the light within others and having community and having that sense of connection. So it's understanding personalities, it's understanding energies, it's an understanding past life scenarios, and we're all in this together. It's just finding your support system, especially those in the LGBT community. There's a lot of amazing community resources for people even in the mental health. You're finding, I'm definitely much more on the holistic way through meditation and fitness and such. And yet having dialogue, having community to have conversation. That's where the magic will really start happening. And again, there are no mistakes. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your talent and your creation to bring this information because you never know whose heart and soul you're going to be able to touch by sharing, by speaking your truth. So it's a matter of not going into any form of judgment of I'm too fat or I'm too skinny or I'm too old or I'm too whatever. It's just really staying true to who you are and what brings you that happiness so you can really expand the energy into that joy of every cell of every beingness of who you are.
Well, let me just say to you too as well to really thank you for an hour of your time and just giving me the opportunity to take some of my own thoughts, some that I've shared on the show, some that I've shared organically for the first time. It's sort of bittersweet, just in the sense that this isn't the first or the last conversation I'm going to have, and so each conversation is a new opportunity. And so, what the thing that I really try to do is either visualize it as even if each episode is a brick that goes towards building a house, or there's a single piece of a puzzle that goes into a larger picture. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in the big picture idea. I like to think that there is a larger challenge going on here, and then each conversation is an opportunity to take a piece and add to that, which is why the theme that I've been touching on so often is the challenge of keeping up with technology that is designed to outpace us. Now, with all of that said, there's a couple of things I would do ask to wrap up the episode. So I'm interested in hearing what challenges are you facing on a daily basis? Some people go granular with this. They like to talk about very specific things like ranking on Google or YouTube or social media or whatever. Other people like to go more holistic with it. If I had to put my chips down, I think I'd go with the holistic bet. But what are you sort of working on a day-to-day basis?
Well, just to go back to the puzzle pieces, I use that analogy a lot. And the more you find out these pieces of yourself, the easier your puzzle will come together. So that's a number one with that puzzle piece. The challenge is as an entrepreneur and as a coach is the technology piece. It is just that's been the most challenging for me. I just want to show up, plug in,
Hmm.
and with it. But it's staying ahead of the curve. It's advertising. It's keeping, we're using Go High Level as our CRM system and to be able to automate things. And there's so much to learn. So it's just, I almost need to go into a month of lockdown and go to I'm definitely a kinesiology type of learner. I like to be in person to
Hmm.
learn, and I need to do something 3 times or 5 times before I click in. Again, it's that conduit, so I don't think, I just automatically go. So, and I have other coaching friends that have invested hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into their business, and it's paid off. So I think it's getting that amount of money that I want to sink into my business, which, it's very costly, and it's wondering who you can trust as a coach to do your back end systems. And because I've heard some nightmares from people that are thinking they've hired great people. It comes from a recommendation, and it's not a match made in heaven. Like we've got a Facebook marketing guy, and we handed him a big chunk of change, and he's not conducive for our business. We're not a match made in heaven. So
Hmm.
it's like, okay, I've got to surpass my fear and say, thank you. I don't judge you for who you are as a human being, but this business, just your business with our business, is not a match at all. So that's the biggest thing as a challenge. And back to the AI scenario, I've been playing around with ChatGPT for probably close to a year. And
Yeah, same.
I've gotten the messages from my guides that it's it's really here to assist us, and I use it in moderation. If I'm sending an email, I'll cut and paste something. And I had to do a bio and share a story, and I talked it into my phone and I cut and pasted it and I ran it through Chat GPT. Well, that thing was amazing, and I did it in a course of 15 minutes. That would have taken me, without the assistance of Chat GPT, it would have probably taken me 3 hours. It's
Some, but not all of the titles were given to me by ChatGPT. I usually do it myself, but sometimes I just hit that wall and I just can't think of one. So
yeah.
ChatGPT spits out 10 answers and I go, I'm going to take that one, move it around a little bit, and now it's good. So if anybody can figure out the 3 episodes that were titled by ChatGPT, I will buy you a soda. Okay. Or
Okay.
something healthier. Kombucha. I actually got into kombucha a lot lately. And I actually just wanted to make a quick comment just about we said the kinesiology of being able to actually be ensconced and be doing it, and it just made me think about how much more satisfying it is to write on an old school typewriter than modern computers. Like my laptop is kind of satisfying, but the tactile feedback from watching the typewriter go, it just speaks to how the joy of experiencing things as a human being with human sensations is in decline. But I think we're actually going to see an upswing of this because we are entering into a VR metaverse state.
Mhm.
And ironically, as much as this is going to be a heavily tech driven thing, it should actually in many ways get us closer to having more human experiences by being more hands on, being less about just inputting everything onto a keyboard. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, let's
And
hope so.
and then the last question for you is uh, kind of in the same vein as the previous one is if you give yourself a 5-year vision for where you see things going with your work, where do you think
You
you're
know,
headed?
Definitely, I really resonate with doing the group scenario, because the group, it builds community. It puts souls together so they feel they have a common thread with people that understand them. If they're showing up as a group scenario, you've got that common thread. And I'm definitely about collaboration. So it really is about opening up now that things are really wide open again, and allowing gateways for people that are of that resonant field to come together and have a support system, that we are growing together, we're expanding, we're creating together, and not feeling like I have to do it alone.
Mhm.
You know, Leslie and I do a lot. Our businesses, we run two businesses. We work together, we flow together, and we're really ready to open up to allow more business opportunities to come our way as we expand into the creative mindset. And I'm wanting to produce a television show around mental health and prevention of addiction and, community. That's where it's really, as we all, I'm turning 60, and you see the struggle that people are having that don't have children, and that support system, which is so important. So building community over the next 4 or 5 years is a definite big thing on my list to create over the next few years.
I'm happy to hear that. I will just say one of a previous guests from a few months ago, Lori Bolin, very similar space in helping people with helping families dealing with addiction and mental health and substance abuse. So I think that
Mhm.
there is a pretty solid connection there that might be worth looking into. But that is me wearing my
Awesome.
producer's hat. So for everybody, thank you for being a part of the program. Lisa, thank you for your expertise and your wisdom today. What else can I say, right? It's just great to be able to do this show and help get the messages out there. So with that said, would you want to let people know whereabouts they can find you online in case they want to reach out?
Absolutely. People can shoot me an email. My email is Lisa at pure, Pure, spirit, Spirit, healing, HEALING.com. And also I have a website, lifeatmybest.com. And you'll find me online. So that
Terrific.
sounds great.
All right,
Thank
well,
you. Thank you. And a
thank you as well.
blessing to all your listeners out there.
And same to you as well. This has been another episode of the Impactful Coaching Podcast. You can find our website, impactfulcoachingpodcast.com, and you can email me directly for feedback, ideas, or if you're a coach and you want to say your piece on our program, we'd be happy to have you. So that is Joseph, JOSEPH, at impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. The rest is spelled the way you've been conditioned to believe. So with that, thank you, and it is our endeavor to ensure in whatever way you are helping others, we want you to be impactful while you're at it.